If you walked into a video store in the 1980s, chances are you'd have a plethora of campsite slasher movies to choose from. Yes, there were so many of them that we have to use the word plethora. Of course, many of them would be entries in the popular Friday the 13th franchise, but there were also a ton of camp slashers that didn't get sequels. Some of these standalone slashers became cult classics. The Burning, Madman, Just Before Dawn, The Final Terror. Others are more obscure, and some have been largely forgotten over time. There was The Forest, The Prey, Moonstalker, Berserker, Body Count, Cheerleader Camp, Don't Go in the Woods Alone. With so many camp slashers to choose from, a film really had to be special to stand out from the pack. Writer and director Robert Hiltzik's 1983 camp slasher Sleepaway Camp was something very special. It delivered the murder and mayhem that viewers were expecting. Then it lodged itself in their minds with an ending that no one saw coming. Unlike most of the other slashers of the time, it managed to spawn a franchise, giving the horror genre a new icon, Angela Baker. Her name might not be as well known as the likes of Jason, Michael, Freddy, or even Leatherface, but she did slash her way through multiple movies. In this episode of 80s Horror Memories, we're taking a look at Sleepaway Camp to see how Hiltzik defied the odds, started a franchise, and shocked the audience.
I remember, again, going back to VHSs, pausing because I was like, there's no way I'm seeing this.
So pack a bag of goodies, make sure you have a whole bag of chips, and let's go visit Angela Baker at Sleepaway Camp in our 80s Horror Memories. Horror has long been seen as a stepping stone genre. A lot of filmmakers make their feature debut with a low-budget horror movie, the idea being that there will be a good return on investment, thus opening the door for them to be able to follow it up with something even bigger. This approach to breaking into the film industry has resulted in some massive success stories. Sam Raimi went from The Evil Dead to Spider-Man, Peter Jackson went from Bad Taste to The Lord of the Rings, James Wan went from Saw to Fast and Furious 7. Robert Hiltzik didn't have the same sort of career trajectory as those guys did, but he got started in very much the same way. He was a grad student at NYU with dreams of getting into filmmaking when he had the idea for Sleepaway Camp. He wanted to make something that would be inexpensive, easy to market, and would take place primarily in just one location. So making a campground slasher was the obvious choice, especially since he had grown up going to a summer camp called Camp Algonquin in Argyle, New York. He had admitted that horror movies aren't his top choice when it comes to going out to watch a movie, but horror was the most promising way to get his directing career started. A lot of slashers begin with a scene set years before the events that follow, and Sleepaway Camp is no different. Hiltzik had the opening scene of the film in mind from the start. We see a man hanging out on a lake with his young children, a son and a daughter. Then their peaceful afternoon takes a nightmarish turn when some dim-witted teens in a speedboat crash into the family. It's tragic. It's disturbing. It's a great way to get a horror movie started. Hiltzik also knew exactly how he was going to end the movie. He just had to fill out what was going to happen between those two scenes. 8 years after the boating accident, we find the father's surviving child has been taken in by their Aunt Martha, a woman who is apparently a doctor even though she appears to have some serious mental issues. Martha sends her son Ricky and his cousin Angela off to camp, after making them promise not to tell anyone how they got the results of their physical exams. That's odd, but we'll move right along and discover that camp life is not all that pleasant. Camp Arawak is populated by some very questionable characters. There's camp owner Mel with an old man look and knee-high black socks that make him irresistible to teenage counselor Meg. There's head counselor Ronnie, who wears such short shorts he might as well just go around in a Speedo. Then there's the pedophile head chef Artie. The kids are almost all foul-mouthed brats who tend to be just awful to one another. And the worst of the bunch is Angela's bunkmate, Judy, a bully for the mean girl record books. Angela has trouble adjusting to her time at camp. She doesn't speak, she doesn't eat, and this doesn't sit well with most of her peers, so they start picking on her, leaving Ricky to angrily stand up for her on multiple occasions. Angela is able to make a connection with fellow camper Paul, but that makes her the target of more bullying. And soon enough, the people who get on Angela and Ricky's bad side start getting killed or horrifically injured. Doused with boiling water, drowned, stung by bees, slashed. While writing the script, Hiltzik envisioned the camp he knew from childhood, Camp Algonquin. He had no idea whether or not he would actually get to film there, but when he had presented the idea of making a movie on the camp property during the off-season, the owner gave him the okay. It didn't even matter what kind of movie he was going to make. So what if it was going to be about campers and counselors being brutally murdered? Charging the production a small fee to film there was just a way to make some extra cash during the camp's downtime. Hiltzik raised a budget of $350,000. He put together a 5-week shooting schedule that would last from September through October 1982, which is why in some shots you can see fall leaves on the trees at this summer camp. He also drew up extensive storyboards, but after the first day of shooting, he had already fallen a day behind schedule. The first day of shooting was the boating accident, and filming on the water took longer than expected. So the storyboards had to be set aside, but the shoot never fell any further behind schedule. Most production would have cast older actors to play the younger characters. You know, a way to get around child labor laws. But Hiltzik wasn't interested in doing that. He wanted his kid characters to be played by actual kids, and he did a good job of finding the right actors for the roles, regardless of age. We got Jonathan Tiersten as the hilariously intense and foul Ricky, Christopher Collette as Angela's sweet but flawed love interest Paul, Catherine Kami as bitchy counselor Meg, Mike Kellen as camp owner Mel, who starts worrying about the camp getting bad publicity as the body count gets higher, Paul D'Angelo as Ronnie, Desiree Gould going way over the top as crazy Aunt Martha, Owen Hughes as the despicable Artie, Robert Earl Jones, that's the father of James Earl Jones, as Ben the cook. Alan Breton plays Frank the cop and shaved his mustache between scenes. That means that towards the end of the movie, he has a very unconvincing fake stash. Hiltzik wanted to cast a blonde as Judy and nearly gave the role to Jane Krakowski, who would be seen in National Lampoon's Vacation that same year, and is now best known for her work on 30 Rock, Ally McBeal, and Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. But in the end, he decided to cast the brunette Karen Fields, who made sure Judy became a girl that nightmares are made of. And as Angela, he cast 13-year-old Felissa Rose, who would still be considered a genre icon today, even if she hadn't made any other movies. That's how impactful her performance as Angela is, especially when you couple it with that ending. The viewer comes to care about Angela while watching her get picked on simply by being quiet. We cheer for Ricky when he stands up for her, even if he does need to chill a little. It's nice to see her come out of her shell while interacting with Paul, and then everything comes crashing down.
It was shocking to say the least. It was the twist that I absolutely did not see coming.
Camp Arawak doesn't seem like a nice place to be, but that wasn't the case for the cast and crew. The production was sort of a 5-week camping trip. Parents dropped their kids off at the set and trusted Hiltzik to take care of them. Between shots, the kids had fun hanging out and playing at the campground. Felissa Rose's parents agreed to let her be involved as long as she didn't have to get naked or be shown killing anybody. Now we have to get into spoiler territory, because it is impossible to talk about Sleepaway Camp without addressing who the killer is. and that ending. Because in the end, Angela is revealed to be the killer, and during that scene, the character is also nude.
Before Usual Suspects, before Sixth Sense, before Saw, the twist that had everyone talking was it Felicia Rose and her penis. I'm sorry, spoiler alert.
Rose wasn't directly involved with the filming of any of the death scenes. When we see the killer's hands, those are Jonathan Tiersten's hands. It was fine that Rose's parents didn't want their daughter to do the killing. The director wanted to throw the viewer off by showing more masculine hands anyway. And when we see the silhouette of the killer standing in a doorway, that's also Tiersten. The kills are satisfying and often disturbing. We rarely see the killing blows being delivered. But unlike the censorship that some Friday the 13th movies had to endure, this wasn't a ratings board decision. This was by design. As makeup artist Ed French told Fangoria magazine, if we were to shoot things in the straightforward way that they're usually done, then my work would get cut, the film would be edited, and nobody would be getting any entertainment value out of it. Still, the payoff on these murders is seeing something terrible happen. You won't necessarily lose your popcorn, but we did manage to portray a number of terrible things happening. He was especially proud of the scene where we see an arrow get shot through someone's throat when they're in the middle of speaking. French was also tasked with making the final shot work, where we see a nude Angela standing on the beach, the severed head of a victim at her feet. And everyone is shocked to see that she has a penis. To accomplish this, Hiltzik had to find a young man with a build small enough to believably double for Rose. He had to be at least 18 to legally do the nude scene, but he also had to have a narrow enough face to be able to wear a mask of Rose's face. Made from a mold that French took of her head with her mouth wide open, Rose also had to hold her mouth open for the close-ups of her that were then edited into the sequence. It's an unforgettable sight, and to this day, Rose will hold her mouth open in the same way when she takes pictures with fans. Flashbacks are used to help us understand exactly what's going on with Angela. It was the little boy who survived the family boating accident in the beginning, not the girl as we've been assuming. But crazy Aunt Martha already had a son, Ricky, and wanted a daughter. So she decided to raise little Peter Baker as a girl, Angela. It's a twist that blindsides the audience. It's shocking. It's intercut with shots of a nude, feral Angela to shock us even more. This is an ending that sticks with people for years, decades even. Most horror fans who watch Sleepaway Camp remember the first time they saw that ending. I know I certainly do.
But that final image that is, I think, seared in the brain of anyone that has seen that movie, and specifically seeing the movie and not knowing that it was coming, which I did not know was coming. Again, before the days of internet's talking and IMDb message boards or, Rotten Tomatoes, you had to discover a movie for yourself. You had to watch it and see it. And I remember not having any concept of the last 3 minutes of the movie where you're staring at a young girl holding a decapitated head with that fucking mouth open and her penis.
We 80s kids tended to start watching horror movies at a very young age. I was probably only 5 years old at the time I saw this movie, watching it with my teenage brother. And I remember my brother's vocal, shocked reaction to the ending. I didn't even know what was happening at that moment. I was too young to be able to put together all the pieces. My brother had to explain it to me.
You just gotta be friends with these kids, that's all. Let's go.
This made for a very memorable viewing experience. And on our next trip to the video store, we rented Sleepaway Camp 2. In the years since the release of Sleepaway Camp, some have labeled the film as being transphobic, although there are fans in the trans community who stand up for it. Because the horror of this moment isn't that Angela has a penis, it's that Aunt Martha is such an unfit caregiver that she raised Angela to be someone other than herself. It was Aunt Martha who made Peter a girl, told the boy to hide his own identity, to be ashamed of his own body. This is why Angela is so meek and quiet, why she doesn't swim with the other girls, why she showers at a different time, why she doesn't participate when they play sports. Every day she has to work to hide her true self. because Aunt Martha made her do this. Being forced to bottle up everything has made Angela unbalanced herself and homicidal. The reveal could have been handled more delicately, but the 80s were not a delicate time, and the extra element of Peter and Angela having a gay father probably wasn't necessary. But I don't read Sleepaway Camp as a transphobic film. Aunt Martha is the true villain in this story. Ed Belew provided a great score for the film, and then after Hiltzik has knocked us out of our seats with the ending, we get an awesome closing credits song, Angela's Theme, or Just What I've Been Looking For by Frankie Vinci, one of the all-time great horror movie end credit songs as far as I'm concerned. Sleepaway Camp had its premiere in New York City on November 18th, 1983. And even though it missed Halloween, it was still the top-grossing film in New York that weekend. It made its way to even more theaters in '84 and was very financially successful, drawing in $11 million during its theatrical run. This was plenty to lead to sequels, with Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 being shot back-to-back, without the involvement of Hiltzik or Rose. But they weren't done with the concept. 20 years later, Hiltzik and Rose re-teamed for Return to Sleepaway Camp, a sequel that wasn't nearly as well received as the original movie, to put it lightly.
None of the other Sleepaway Camps held a candle to that, I think, because then they became redundant and followed the same formulaic thing of all the other horror movies. That movie was built around a moment that the moment was so well done and she was so good in it. It was just the perfect shot, the perfect expression, the perfect blood, the perfect prosthetic. I mean, everything about that ended. And so you're left with that shocking image seared in your brain, and that's what you talked about, and you told people you gotta go see this movie. So yeah, without that scene, I don't know if I would have loved the movie, but with that scene, it's fucking great.
As of now, Sleepaway Camp and Return to Sleepaway Camp are the only two movies that Hiltzik has ever directed. His follow-up wasn't so good, but that first movie was great. What do you think of Sleepaway Camp? Do you remember the first time you saw that ending? Do you find that movie to be problematic today? Leave a comment and share your memories of this 80s slasher. And we'll see you in the next one, Gorehounds.
On the next episode, we're taking a spooktastic journey to another 80s classic, the Anthology series. So watch out for the legendary Crypt Keeper and prepare for the macabre as we take a look back on the iconic series such as Tales from the Dark Side and Tales from the Crypt. Until next time, Gorehounds.
Hi friends, your humble narrator Tyler Nichols here, and I hope that you enjoyed that episode of 80s Horror Memories. If you missed our previous episode, click over here. If you want to see more from our series, click up here. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Subscribe right here. And most importantly, stay spooky, folks.